Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And today it is publication day for Tim Dorsey and his brand new book, which has a very inspired title, The Tropic of Stupid. I love that title. And Barbara's holding one up, and I've got one here at the store, and we have some limited number of signed books left. But welcome, Tim. It's great to see you. Congratulations.
Hello from Florida.
Florida. And I will largely be in the background, but if you have questions for Tim, I'll be monitoring the Facebook feed here. So feel free to send them on in, and I'll be here throughout, but I'll pop up with any questions you might have. So in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Peters, who's in her library.
I'm in my library, is my older library. It's even different furniture today, but it's nice to have it. So Tim, congratulations. This is book 24. I can hardly believe it. Sir J. Storms has
I can believe it less.
So I remember when Florida Roadkill published, and you've always had interesting titles and really dramatic covers. So they make a splash, I think. Is there some particular craziness about Florida that inspires satire? Because, you're not the only Florida writer who enjoys satire, but you're certainly good at it. What is it about Florida that inspires it?
Well, I don't mean to be facetious, but if you're going to write satire, you're going to write something, you're going to have an attempt at kind of skewed humor. It's kind of off-center, maybe a little dark. You don't necessarily have to be inspired. You almost just have to report what happens in Florida. You don't have to, in other words, Carl Hiacin's, the big, 800-pound gorilla when it comes to this stuff. And he says that you actually almost have to, subtract imagination from the reality, because the reality is too weird to be believed and make a good book. So you have to almost take, you have to, tame down what's in the newspapers to make people fit in a book.
Until recent weeks, Arizona was really not all that lending itself to satire, but some of the bizarre stuff that has happened in connection with the election really makes me feel as though Arizona's taking a run up on Florida with, some of the antics here. And I don't know, maybe there's a certain mania that seems to come with the pandemic too. There's like pandemic behavior. So while Florida has had it all along, maybe some of us are going to be a little more like Florida while all this is going on.
Yeah, well, this is only making Florida. Well, Florida is never going to stop getting weirder. I mean, there's no limit. But this is kind of the last year or so has pushed us upward quite a bit.
I find it interesting that you and Carl, and we talked to a number of Floridians in recent months. John Sanford appeared with Carl Hiason, and then he also did an event with Nicholas Basbans, isn't it, who wrote the 1980 book, Patrick, about the terrible year in Miami of 1980, which, you were in Florida for that, Tim. And it seems to me that working for a newspaper, being a reporter, because all of you guys have been reporters, must tap you into some of the really crazy Florida stuff. You were a reporter in Montgomery, and then you moved to Tampa, and you worked at the Tampa Tribune for like a decade before you retired to write full time.
Yeah, it gives you a front row seat on all the strangeness. You go to work each day, and your job is just to go out and see the most bizarre human behavior. You're seeing the peak, you're seeing the spike of strangeness out there every day. And you can't help but remember, a variety of, just best stories.
I'm sure that's true, but all the people I mentioned were really basically in Miami. And I didn't realize, I've tended to think of it as more, the Miami part of Florida, but you're writing up all over Florida, actually, because this book opens in Key West, which I thought was a lot of fun. But, if you worked in Tampa, was it just as nutty in Tampa as it was in Miami?
Let me put it this way. Florida is so strange that even if you're not, as crazy as Miami, you're in the ball game. I'd say Miami is probably got the largest reservoir of strange stuff. Like the guys that were the fishermen that were they caught a shark in the Miami River, which is right next to downtown. And they were, I guess, from South America, so they didn't understand how the restaurant business works in Florida, a major city. So they said, "This is a big shark. We can make a lot of money." So they kept trying to sell it at seafood restaurants, and in downtown they got kicked out. Finally, they took the free people mover, which is a monorail, and people were reporting four guys holding a shark like under their arms like a surfboard, hanging onto the hanging things. And finally, they ended up, but this is how the story started. They ended up just getting disgusted, and the shark started smelling, and I couldn't sell it anymore after not being able to. Anyway, they just threw it out in the middle of the street. And so the first day story was mystery shark found in the middle of Flagler, Boulevard or whatever. So one of the major arteries in downtown Miami, and then everybody called in, and the next day they tracked every spot that the guys had. They tracked their route, for a second story. Now that's not going to necessarily happen in Tampa, but we have our share. We had a bank robber who was very quick and with his hands and stuff, and he got the bank bag and was very calm, and he quickly shoved it down the front of his blue jeans and covered it with his shirt before he even turned around, and so nobody even noticed that they had been robbed. And you know how like some people who set fires like to watch them burn, so he waited for the police to arrive and stood in the back of the crowd of onlookers, and then the dye pack exploded in the bag. Well, he fell down and he didn't get up right away.
Lord, when I think of Tampa, I really think of the Columbia restaurant and famous black bean soup and gasparilla culture and so forth. It is Tampa, right? That I have that right.
Yes, Columbia is. I think it's 1905. It opened in Ybor City on Seventh Avenue. And I mentioned one other thing because you were talking about what's going on lately, the pandemic or whatever. You'd think that might settle things down because people would go inside, but this is something I'm using. But I was reading these news stories. What they did is they briefly closed the Keys. Now, if yeah, I'm down in the Keys right now. If when you live in the Keys, you have hurricane reentry decals or stickers you put on your car, right? That way, after a hurricane, they allow local residents in because they don't want looters or onlookers or just people getting in the way. So residents have hurricane reentry stickers. So what they're doing is they closed down the Keys at the beginning of the pandemic just until they got a handle on it, figure out what was going on. Well, tourists wanted to see the Keys so badly that they were scalping. They were selling counterfeit reentry stickers in Miami, and the police confiscated like 200 of them. Now that's pretty strange. You want to go run down to a tiki bar in the Keys so bad that you're lining up buying counterfeit stickers for your car. But anyway, nope, it didn't tone it down. It didn't scare off the strangeness.
I think of a lot of us, when we think of the Keys, we think of Margaritaville, we think of Jimmy Buffett. Some of us think of Ernest Hemingway. But what's interesting to me is, and I hadn't really considered it that much, that in your opening chapter here of Tropic of Stupid, Serge and his always stoned buddy Coleman are going out diving. So there's apparently some really good coral reef diving down there, but that somehow hadn't really come across my radar.
Yeah, well, that's how I kind of see the Keys. I do think of Hemingway and Buffett, but it's the nature down here. I mean, you can go hiking through nature trails in the mangroves. You can, explore, some historic old forts yeah, if you can get out on the water, you've got all kinds of different water experiences as well. You can go on the backcountry, which is on the north side of the Keys, the Gulf of Mexico and Florida Bay, and that's just very calm. And you just go out on a skiff boat or whatever and fish, or you can kayak. And I like to take on the ocean side toward the Gulf Stream. I like to take boats out, and they go out about 6 or 7 miles because there's certain spots on the Keys where the reefs come up really shallow, and you're so far out that you get all manner of large fish. They don't necessarily come in real close to the shore, so you can go out there and just see everything. You see giant loggerhead turtles. You'll see sharks that really won't bother you. For the most part. I say that sharks that don't bother you, until they do. But no, there hasn't been any incidences out there. And giant tarpon, moray eels. That's so anyway. If you make enough trips down there, you got to get out on the water.
So basically what you're saying is that even in famous tourist spots, I mean, the Keys are one, Scottsdale's one for that matter. Some people lead ordinary lives. They're not, part of the tourist background or part of the sites. Or I know people, they're regular people who live in Las Vegas, not connected with gambling, they're plumbers and electricians and school teachers, telephone guys, whatever. But it's funny how when we think of a place like Key West, we fasten upon those things that draw tourists there much more than we fasten upon just regular life.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And if you go down Duval Street, you can't get away from it. It's like the Vegas Strip, except it's subtropical. But if you just shy of Key West, if you go down, because it's impossible to live in Key West. The prices are just ridiculous. But if you that strip that's just before Key West, you'll get among the locals, and there's a wonderful local lifestyle. And there are coffee shops and diners, and just the little places where you go to get your your morning fare or whatever. And that's the part of the Keys that I really love.
Well, one of the things I've always enjoyed about Serge is the travel, because you do wind him all over Florida in his various adventures as a vigilante serial killer. And I was thinking, Tim, that the anti-hero is not uniquely American. In fact, there's a new thing on Netflix called Lupin, which is based upon a 19th century character, Arsène Lupin, who was a gentleman thief and rogue and so forth. I didn't remember vigilante serial killers as a big part of 19th century literature, but why did you pick on Serge to be an anti-hero when he could have been like a regular private eye or something?
It's a good thing you point that out, because that was an accident. When I was writing the first book, and I was writing the first draft, he was going to be a villain, not an anti-hero, just a regular villain. And I had my good characters, who are just normal guys who just get caught up. It's like almost like North by Northwest. Cary Grant just stumbles into something and he doesn't even know what he's doing. And so I had Serge. He was going to be a villain, but I also made him, functionally crazy, because those are the villains that I find most compelling, generally in film and television. And so one of the things, if not the thing, I wanted the books to be about was the state of Florida. I wanted to make the location of Florida a character, essentially the lead character. And so I had all of this stuff, and I started out where I had a map of Florida, and I had basically to connect up all the places that I wanted to showcase in the book. I drew basically a travel route. So I flowed the plot through that travel route, because it ended up going to be, some from road tripping, a chase, this and that. And so I came up with all that, and I had all of this trivia and esoterica and everything about these locations that I wanted to kind of get in the book, because that's what entertains me. And so I was going along, and I had different characters talking about stuff, or one would maybe not know that much about Florida. Say, hey, look at that, what's that about? And they go check it out, or his friend would say, oh, I think that's this. But I had Serge, since he is functionally crazy. At one point he really loves. I came up with this, just like I said, accidentally, as I'm just flowing along writing, and I just had him rant about this certain section of Florida and the development and all the things he remembers from his childhood. And so as I did the rant, I had him passionate about Florida. And again, he was juxtaposing growing up here, and I finished that rant, and I go, wow, that was pretty interesting. And then he did his second rant, and at the end of that, I said, this is my main character. I got to shift it, because now, because the thing is I was able to get in much more Florida and do it not in a dry way like a travel guide. I just had him spitting out trivia and stuff in a way that I liked, but that I never intended. So because he is a great mouthpiece for Florida. That's how he got nominated. We basically pulled him up from the second string and put him in the starting position.
I always think that humorous mystery and comic mystery is hard to sustain, but I think of you more like Jonathan Swift, a satirical writer rather than a humor writer. And because there's an edge to it. Um, and therefore I think it's easier to keep it going without making it too cute or turning it into caricature. Because, if it's just funny, you have to keep upping the game to keep the jokes on. Think of how many TV shows eventually kind of died because they got so tired. Laugh-In, do you remember Laugh-In? It was hilarious
It's funny
for a
you remember
while.
you mentioned Laugh-In. I just I called it up. I was able to find it on one of the streaming services, and I watched a couple episodes, and it was very nostalgic and very dated.
Yeah, but I mean, eventually it wore itself out. But I think when you write satire, you can keep it going much longer. Well, this is book 24, so obviously you have. Now we've mentioned that Serge is functionally crazy, so I actually got a description of him, which I enjoyed. This character, Serge, has several coexisting mental illnesses that render him obsessive, psychopathic, schizophrenic, and frequently homicidal. But he does have a strong sense of moral absolutism. So did you decide to just like throw all this at him, or did it arise gradually as you wrote him? Or do you even
Uh,
know that's what he's got? I guess that's an interesting question.
I came up with this paragraph where I thought of every hyphen I could, like obsessive compulsive, paranoid, schizophrenic, manic depressive, just everything I could think of, anal retentive. And then I said he was thought to be the only documented case of self-inflicted shaken baby syndrome.
Okay. So here we have him at the keys, but he gets interested, or somehow or other it occurs to him that it would be interesting to do DNA testing of himself, submit his results to one of the genealogical sites like ancestry.com and find out, what his family story is and maybe create a family tree. Were you inspired by the Golden State Killer case, or, similar, to think about this as a plot
I had heard,
device?
I heard about that case a long time ago, and I remembered it, and I started thinking about it, and I forgot about it, but I thought it was interesting. I don't know how they would go about doing it until I started thinking about it, but it's I guess it's a geometric progression, and it perfectly lent to like I was going to have Serge do it. Aside from the plot, since Serge loves Florida, I wanted him to have flashbacks to several of his ancestors, and they each one have historic Florida jobs that no longer exist. In other words, like you mentioned, Ybor City. Well, all the people who used to roll the cigars, back in the turn of the century, they would have somebody sitting up on a tall stool, and he would read all day. That was his job. And he would read the newspapers, just because everybody's sitting there rolling, and it can get boring and whatever. So that was the reader. It was a famous job at Ybor City. So I had the guy reading, during, he's reading along, and then one day, and I give the date, I don't remember exactly, 1898, when the USS Maine, blew up in, Havana Harbor.
Yeah.
So I did that as one little snapshot. Then there's something that used to be really big back in the day before citrus got big, and that was turpentining. They use turpentine for all kinds of things that they don't really I don't know if there's the demand now, but they used to use it for a sort of a tar to waterproof ships riggings and stuff. So you can see how there'd be more doing. So I had him, and I looked up where these places were and what it was like to be a turpentiner, and so I was able to put that in the book. And then so I wanted to catch old Florida. I wanted to capture early 1900s, late 1800s. And I mean, if you tap, I don't mean to say tap for turpentine, but yeah, if you have something like going the DNA route and him looking it up, having it tie into the plot, this is an example of, you never know what opportunity that will offer. And it allowed me to just have these, as he finds a relative in a courthouse, he just starts, of course, he's nuts, so he has an imagination, but he goes to one courthouse and there's just like, right next to him is an FDLE officer, which is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and they're tracking a serial killer, right? So, and so they're standing next to each other, and they're waiting to read the same file. And so, but Serge is so annoying and obnoxious that the agent, instead of taking an interest in Serge, blocks him out because he's like, getting in her way of doing her job, because he's just chatting her up. Anyway, that offered me the chance to get in some stuff that I love historical reading about Florida, and it allowed me to push Florida to the foreground.
There's such a good point about all the jobs that have been lost in a relatively short period of time, things that were essential. I often think about the fax machine and how it ran our lives for such a brief span. And then, I remember when we opened the Poison Pen, my husband brought a fax machine in on day 3. And I said to him, what? I thought because he's a famous foodie that he just wanted to have a fax machine to order pizza for all of us. But, he said, no, you're really going to need this. And I think it was like 2 or 3 months before the fax machine was programmed with international numbers because of all the tourists that came to Scottsdale from other countries and then, wanted to do business. And yet it was hardly any time before that technology went away. So, when you're talking decades in Florida, like the Cuban cigar rollers in Ybor City, of course, jobs have been lost.
But I don't know if it's still there, but like if Ybor City right now, I think it has one spot, and if you walk down Ybor City, it's meant to be this way. It's meant to be a kind of a showcase. It's this corner of an ancient brick building, and inside there's one room on the corner where they have like 4 guys left rolling cigars, and it's a cigar store, but they have freshly rolled cigars, and you can see the guys doing it, through the windows. But there's like that's the only time I've actually seen people actually doing it, and my knowledge, it was like just 4. But because it's such a cherished memory and a historical, aspect of Ybor City, I think they're doing it not because they need them to do it. They do it more like just to kind of showcase the old ways.
Well, it's not that different from Williamsburg. I mean, if you go to Williamsburg, they have people there, actual blacksmiths and people making hats the old way, and they, they're keeping all these old crafts and old jobs alive. So, if they can do it in a cigar shop in a corner of Ybor City, that's kind of a nice mini version of Williamsburg. Why not?
Yeah, and another one is like in Florida, highlight players. I loved highlight when I was a kid because it was like I just thought it was amazing. And today, I mean, it's so different. Back then, it was a night out. Everybody got dressed up.
Right.
The frontons were full. I mean, it was like a Major League Baseball game. It was just packed, and everybody was like, they'd go out to a fancy dinner before or after, and they'd go to highlight. It was a big thing. I remember my folks going out, and I'd have babysitters all the time. And today you go, and they're very empty. I mean, I won't mention which locations, but like one's very nice. I'm glad they've kept it up, but very low attendance. And another one is just like some dog track that's down and out. You get torn up tickets on the floor and 6 people walking around, and I mean, and it's just, it makes you sad for the old days.
I haven't thought about highlight for a long time. For those of you who are wondering, it's spelled Jailai, isn't it?
Yeah, Jaialai, or yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. I remember that it was a really big thing. It was sort of like, going to a tennis tournament or something. Why do you think it died away? Because it was a really interesting sport.
I'm not sure. I think maybe other sports, other forms of entertainment, and then of course you got the lottery, state lottery down here. You see, that was a pari-mutuel kind of a thing. But I just, who knows, what state's popular. But that's a slice of old Floridiana. I know they've had a few frontons other places, but yeah, that was, there's a lot of different places where it was, going out and getting, like I said, getting all dressed up. and making a big night or something. And a lot of those places are gone, and you can see the remnants of it. And then, but now other places have taken off. You see where like they'll rejuvenate a certain old place. They'll have like in St. Petersburg. You'll go down Central Avenue now. They have martini bars, and they have a whole night scene that wasn't there. It was all boarded up. In the old. It used to be the old place where older people would sit on green benches in the sun, and that was it. And now it's a thriving scene. So you know, love to.
Yeah, it's all sort of a, not gentrification, but almost, it's amazing the cycles that cities and other places go through as trends
Right.
in population and so forth change. So it's great you're chronicling them. To go back to Tropic of Stupid, so Serge begins to wonder, I mean, he's the actual serial killer, if he has an ancestor who was a serial killer while he's trawling through all this. So are you supposing a potential genetic link, or is it just for fun?
Let me. Uh, I'm gonna table that question so the
Okay.
reader can get to it if they had a chance to read the full book. But I'll allow that is all answered and much more in the book. There's a naked sales pitch, but no, I'll let that be a surprise.
I think it's a fun concept, whatever you do with it. It's very entertaining. So I also have read that one of the things that, oh, I forgot about the guys tied up in the trunk, because, we're bucketing along in the Keys, and then every once in a while, Serge or Coleman opens the trunk and talks to somebody inside.
You got to remember which one. I mean, it's always happening because they basically Serge lacks impulse control, and that's his moral absolutism. He, people are supposed to. He gets upset when people don't have manners and don't kind of sort of conform to the common decency and common courtesy in society. People litter or cruel to animals, or take advantage of either senior citizens or children or whatever, and he'll step in, and usually because he acts so polite, whatever jerk it is responds by taking it even to the next level, and then that sets Surge off, and then the guy ends up in a trunk. So,
Got it. And it's like a running gag, in other words. Yeah. I have one more question before I see if Patrick has comments. I couldn't help but notice we've described Serge with all of his various illnesses and so forth, but then Coleman, his sidekick, I mean, he ingests practically everything that's possible to ingest to drive yourself over the edge, or, he's a stoner. He takes, I mean, I could hardly believe all the stuff that he manages to ingest without
so
actually destroying his body.
he's permanently self-medicated. He's and I've known a couple people who I don't know. I don't know if they did it for long, but I have observed that, and I thought it would be. Here's the thing: is this is part of being a journalist? Uh, is that in Florida arrest reports? There's a box that you check yes or no, and it says, is this crime or arrest related to drugs or alcohol? And and this is true fact, more than 50% are yes. And
Mm.
so it's a real thing. And plus, uh, I wanted to have somebody be Serge's foil. If Serge, won't take drugs because his personal genetic chemistry is like a drug. I mean, he's just, and so his thing is he just drinks bottled water and black coffee, or well, he like certain creamers, but that's another story. But and he's always getting on Coleman for taking drugs, not too much so, but so there's a banter going back and forth where Serge is saying something that's kind of really intense, and Coleman doesn't quite understand it, so Serge has to explain it more, and Coleman, so anyway, um, it I find, at least for me, I find it's a really good setup for the dialogue pieces. If when I have to explain something when they're going from one location to another, uh, and plus I think Serge is so intense that only somebody who's self-medicating could tolerate being around him. on a long drive.
Good point. I hadn't considered that, but you're absolutely right. While they're driving around on the whatever roadmap you have set out book to book, it would be hard to be in the car with Surgeon. And if there's a guy kicking his heels in the trunk on top of it, makes it even harder.
Yeah, I would mention, you mentioned the keys. The keys play a big part in the book, but there are two other big chunks are in Palm Beach County, primarily on the island of Palm Beach, uh, and where all the very wealthy people are. And then over in Sarasota, not in the city, but there's a state park there. It's one of the largest state parks. It's huge, square acre wise, and there's a lot that takes place at the park, and which has made several appearances in a few books. But those are a couple of locations. So you kind of ping pong back and forth between those, the keys, and so that's the geographical makeup of how Florida enters this book.
It's always fun to track the route, and you've done you always do a really deep dive into local history and the fauna, the flora, all of that. I mean, your books are in their own way, their own interesting way. They're travel logs of Florida. You'd have to, as a tourist, throw some of it out.
I know I had some of the best emails I get are people who said, now I'm gonna have to go back and do the old books. But after I read 2 or 3 or 4 of the books, as I went through, I started either making notes or taking a yellow highlighter or dog-earing pages or whatever when there's a location that I want to go visit that or some kind of landmark. And so when they said we finish the book that summer, we take a surge vacation. We travel the route of whatever the plot was in the book. So
I love that, a surge vacation. That is terrific. But that makes the books interesting, because while Surge himself and Coleman and all are so off the charts, the actual Florida stuff is real, and you can depend on it. So I find that an interesting mix in your books.
Oh, thank you.
Right, you're welcome. Patrick, do you have any comments or questions?
Why, yes, indeed. There are quite a few comments.
Excellent.
Actually, the one I would like to start with, Cynthia has a great one. She says, "Can you send Surge to visit our governor? I'm asking for the state of Florida," which I think is a great comment.
Yes, I can. And I have my own opinions, but right now you can't. How can I put this? You really can't write about politics because you can't top it.
No.
You'll fall short. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, I in Orange Crush, I did a lot of politics, and then you could still be ahead of politics satirically. Now, if you write something about politics, I mean, the book's going to come out in 6 months, but the very next day after you write it, you'll see something on TV that topped it. So,
right. Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned your career as a journalist, and the period was what, the mid 80s until the end of the 90s? Is that about right?
it was 83 to 99.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure you've discussed this quite a bit, but some of the, what did you cover as a reporter, and what was your beat?
Well, it covered, I start out, your general assignment, and you're mainly covering crime, and you go check the police blotter, you go check the jail log and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting in Alabama, in the course of maybe 3 years, I went from that, and then I covered the court system. So I learned a lot about, the law, and, watching trials and stuff. And then my third position in Montgomery was covering politics, the legislature and the governor's office and stuff. So then I came down to Florida for the Tampa Tribune, and I was in one of their bureaus, and it was Sarasota. Actually, it was Sarasota, Manatee County Bureau. We covered 2 counties in that bureau. So I covered Sarasota, and it was anything that happened in Sarasota, I mean, anything. And also you'd write feature stories so that you'd have stuff ready, if you didn't have, a story that day. And, but then for a while I was transferred to Tallahassee, to the Capitol Bureau. The Tampa Tribune had a place up there. So I ended up covering politics, and everything, the legislature. And it there's not a whole lot of difference between the Alabama and Florida when I was covering them. I mean, the capitals look very similar, and the behaviors was very similar. It was fascinating.
So making that transition from being a journalist, obviously, to being a very successful novelist, was writing fiction always something that you wanted to do coming up?
Yes, the fiction actually was why I got into journalism. Was I wanted to have a job where I would write every day, whether I wanted to or not. It would just I would just have to do it as part of my, regular occupation, and that way it would force me. And if you're writing for a newspaper, you got to write fast. I mean, you got to pick up you know pick up on how to do it, because I was inspired by novels, that I love, like Catch 22, Kurt Vonnegut. I'd love to be a writer. I love it, love it, love it. And so, um, you know, worked on the high school paper, worked on the college paper, all the time, and then got into regular newspapers, because during school I noticed my writing improving, so I joined the paper, and it took me. I figured out a couple of years I'll have the Great American Novel. Of course, 16 years later, finally I come out with like Florida Roadkill, but it was indispensable. I mean, I didn't know, it's
Now, were some of the other, there are so many wonderful writers who are associated with Florida, writing about different parts of Florida. Obviously you think of John D. McDonald and oh boy, Charles Willeford and Harry Crews, and just such a wonderful diversity. James W. Hall. Um, were you a big John D. fan coming up?
uh, yes, and it was expensive, and but I finally finished my Travis McGee collection in hardcover, so I got all those. But yeah, John D. It's funny because a lot of people might miss Williford when they're mentioning stuff, and there was within his body of work was that 4-volume uh,
The
Hoke Mosley
Hook
series.
Mosley, yeah, amazing books.
Have you ever heard of Grimhaven?
Yes, I have a copy of that manuscript.
You have it, because for a
Yes, I
while
do.
it must have been purloined, because it's not allowed out of special collections or something. But it's made it onto the internet. You can print it out.
Yes, yes, yeah. For the people that are watching, and then we'll get back to it. But it's worth telling. Um, Charles Willeford wrote a book called Miami Blues, which was a terrific book. But he wasn't really of a mind to turn it into a series, if I'm remembering correctly. And so for the second book in the series, which was published as, what was it, New Hope for the Dead? Tim, is that right?
Well, I don't know if I don't know the order. I mean, I know there was Sideswipe
Second,
and The Way We Die Now and New Hope for the Dead.
right.
And he wrote this book not considering the health of the series, and it is, I mean, it is beyond dark. I mean, it is, and they were right. The publisher said, we can't publish this; it'll kill your series, and it might kill you as an author. You can go ahead and tell them.
Well, not to digress
Yeah, I
too.
don't want to tell the plot because it's too sick.
He gets saddled. Hook Mosley's this crusty, really great crusty private eye character, and he gets saddled with these two teenage daughters, right, from his ex-wife, and it gets really dark really fast halfway through the book, and it's kind of a story. But yeah, Williford gets neglected a lot, I think.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Standiford. Wasn't he also a reporter? And he went from writing fiction. I liked several of his books a lot. And then he's been writing nonfiction, primarily Florida history, if I remember correctly. Are you familiar with?
I'm absolutely sure you're right. I've kind of focused on other of the people at the Florida School, like and there's also, you mentioned Randy Wayne White's in there.
Yeah.
And
Right. In fact, he has a sidekick, not unlike Coleman, in that, Tomlinson is always off on sex and drugs himself as a foil for Doc Ford in the Randy Wayne White books.
And coincidentally, this is just a coincidence, because I did not know who I have the real life person Randy, one of Randy's friends, and then we met in like 2000 or something like that. And so him and his friend, or his friend and I got to be good friends. So I have him in this book, Tropic of Stupid, and he interacts and starts, he starts interacting with Coleman. And but the bottom line is, uh, it's not really officially out there, but the Tomlinson may have been based on this real life person.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Randy hasn't written a book for a couple of years. I keep hoping that he'll come back with one, but that's interesting. I was thinking about Carolina Garcia, who wrote about the Cuban community in Florida around
Right,
Miami.
right, yeah.
And there was another author, Patrick, I can't think of her name, and she died untimely of, I think, cancer, that wrote some female hard-boiled private
Barbara
eye
Parker.
books.
Barbara Parker, right.
Thank you, Barbara Parker, whose books I really liked. And then, we were talking with Carl Hyacin and John Sanford. We remembered Edna Buchanan, who, was also at the Miami Herald when they were there. In fact, John used to put his feet up on her desk and he said, listen to her stories. And he didn't really have to research his novels. He could just take them. So it's a remarkably rich state for authors. James Bourne, he lives in Florida too, I think, Patrick.
Bourne,
So,
Bourne.
yeah.
In Tampa, there's a young writer in Tampa named Steph Post, who I think is really terrific writer.
She is good. Even James Patterson lives in Florida, even though he doesn't write about Florida. So, remarkable number of authors there.
Let me get to some of these questions, because we have a lot of people that are tuning in, and someone makes the comment that they wonder if I did steal the manuscript from the collection, and I may have done that.
No, oh, you're talking about the Grimhaven one?
Yeah, I'm not.
No. I can. The thing was that the manuscript, they didn't want it out, but it was, since it had literary significance, it was in the Fort Lauderdale Library. And it was like under lock and key and special collections. You could request to look at it, but you couldn't take notes. You couldn't, bring a camera or a cell phone to take any pictures. You could just sit at a table and read it, and then you literally, and put it back. Somehow somebody got a copy. I don't know how they did it. Maybe they weren't being supervised enough, and they took pictures of all the pages, and then it got onto the internet. And once it's on the internet, then it's so. Exactly. So no, you did not have to, because I found it on the internet. That's how I found my copy.
Let me get to some of these questions. We have a number of people that are asking about movies and TV. Anything in the works?
There's always they're always nibbling around the edges, to quote F. Scott Fitzgerald. But they're now the rights keep getting purchased, and they keep trying to develop a project, and it literally is just going to be a lightning strike, out of nowhere when I least expect it, if something happens.
Right. The inevitable question. Somebody just mentioned Tom Corcoran. I forgot about him. Yeah, terrific writer.
I was talking to him a couple nights ago on the phone, and I got actually this morning I got a text from him about the book release. So,
Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's great.
And we've forgotten Jonathan King too. Do you remember? Yeah. He was kind of a protege,
real tall guy
of Michael Connelly, and he too, if I remember right, was a reporter.
Yeah, Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
You got your Edna Buchanan, your James W. Hall. There's a lot of Florida writers.
Yeah.
Okay, so if a movie was made, obviously, who are your casting choices for Serge and Coleman?
But see, I see. I guess the best answer, the quickest answer, I'll leave Serge on a shelf here, because I've heard a million different suggestions that go all over the place. From Johnny Depp to Nicolas Cage to just all, it's whatever people see. But somebody mentioned something, I hadn't thought of this, but for Coleman, I almost fell over laughing, but it was they said, what about Chumley from Pawn Stars? I think that would be Coleman.
That would be awesome. Valerie asks, where do you get your revenge ideas? They can be almost disturbing.
They are disturbing, and they're totally wrong. I mean, I don't agree with them at all, but I tend to, after I've had unlike surge, I have impulse control. But if you have impulse control, it's good for society, but you suffer from it. You go away with this acid churning in your stomach. You're so mad that you bit your lip and you didn't answer this jerk back. And so that's when the wheels start turning in my head. What would I like to do? And I'm like, okay, now you're hacked off at this person, and make some money off it. What would surge do to that person? And probably when I'm angry, I come up with the best ideas for this stuff.
Let's see here. Okay, just a lot of great comments. One thing I just wanted to bring up really quickly, and then we'll see what else we have. But are you worried about these places like Florida, like Montana, like these regions in the United States? There's this, they're losing their individuality. They're being diluted by the same Target and Starbucks and on every corner. Does that concern you ever? I mean, about these going away. And
I know. I mean, sure it does. I mean, it's like I was literally the other day I was going through. I was looking at old Miami restaurants, Miami Beach restaurants, and I was looking at what we've lost and places that I used to go. I mean, not just for research. I discovered them because I'd heard about them, but every time that I was in Miami or Miami Beach, I would just always go to like Wolfie's. The Wolfie's is gone. And before that, Pumpernicks is gone. And then we lost the Rascal House. So there was, and thank God, like Joe's Stone Crab is still there.
Still there with key lime pie, which is a really critical thing in addition to the stone crab.
Oh yeah, but I was looking, and the Tobacco Road is gone, which is in Miami proper, and all these places. However, in the Mimo district along Biscayne Boulevard, all of the mom and pop. It's the interesting thing about how things get ruined, like he's talking about, where you go someplace and he talks about Starbucks, but like you'll go in every town has like an Old Navy and a Bed Bath and Beyond, and whatever. It's just the same repeating series of national stores, but the places that they're fascinating are the ones that it wasn't economically viable enough to demolish and put up all this new stuff that is so cookie cutter, right? And so like along the strip of the Mimo district, there's ended up practically boarded up or seedy old motels, but they're of the old Mimo architecture. They're fantastic. And what they're doing now is coming in and making boutique motels out of these. Like there's the Vagabond and the New Yorker and the various ones that are just fascinating along Biscayne. And then after one of the hurricanes, they had this giant copper top girl illuminated sign that they moved and put it on another side of the building there. So you drive down there and it's almost like 50s Miami has been reborn. So there are things that really that tickles my fancy. I mean, when I went, I read articles about it, and I kind of in the back of my mind said, okay, I got to see what they're doing to the district, because I've driven down through there and seen it just laid waste. And but every once in a while, a place will come back.
Well, it's a concern for us here. Scottsdale is losing its Western identity practically every day and turning into Beverly Hills. Lots of the people who had horse farms, ranches, and so forth have been forced out, moved north. They're building condos all over the desert. So I can't see that it would be any different. Climate change may be harsh on Florida in terms of you're going underwater, and really hard on us as we lack water. So who knows how climate change will affect all of this, Patrick? It's bound to.
That's true. Yeah. Let's see. Cynthia asks, will you ever write teen books? Carl Hyacin, does that have any appeal to you? She says, my middle schoolers are always curious about your books that I'm always reading, but I can't quite go there.
I was considering it, and what I did, actually, I've never mentioned this before, but in the Pope of Palm Beach, I took a couple of sort of teen story ideas, if it ever came up, if my publisher ever asked me. But the thing is, I had the book a year rhythm, plus you throw in that Christmas novella that I had, which that year darn near killed me because I did a full tour and then novella and a regular book, and I was out. I never do that again. So the book a year was going well, so I grabbed those two stories that I was going to use for if I was ever going to use it. I just jotted it down. I didn't write it at all. I just wrote like 2 or 3 sentence idea, and I folded them into the plot of the adult book, which was the Pope of Palm Beach. So you go in there, you can pick out the 2 threads, which is the down at the Port of Palm Beach, and the other one was the thread at the um, Trapper Nelson's.
I'm getting some really good casting ideas here while I'm watching. Everybody from Jack Black to Zach Galifianakis, and my favorite here is Tanya Harding's Hitman, which I think is a great choice. Uh, these are excellent suggestions. Let's see. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, and then we can kind of go on to some other things about, is it Ybor or Ybor City?
Ybor.
Ybor, that's what I thought.
IBOR.
Yeah, that's what I thought. There was Ace Atkins wrote a really interesting book about talking about that place in Prohibition times and all about these elaborate tunnels, going under the city. Absolutely fascinating. Like to learn more about that.
Oh yeah, it's funny. Ace on the night shift of the Tampa Tribune, he sat like 2 or 3 desks away from me.
Oh, really?
And we didn't tell each other we were working on our first books, but we compared notes afterwards, so to speak, because during breaks between editions of the paper, we would chat and we would talk about McDonald, we talk about Ian Fleming. That was a common thing that we had. We talked about how Ian Fleming always would put a sense of place in his books, and here's I think I believe it's correct to attribute Ian Fleming. I think in one of his James Bond novels, it was supposed to be Joe Stonecrab, but it was called Bills on the Bay, and James Bond, it was remarked that he had one of his best meals ever at Bills on the Bay, in South Miami Beach. So I don't know. That's how my mind works. You mentioned Ace Atkins, and I end up back at Joe Stonecrab. So.
I have a question about the Winslow Homer painting behind you.
Yes.
Several people have made it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've got, I love Winslow Homer. He's my favorite artist. I actually got 2 hanging here. I got a Hurricane over here, and then I've got a somewhat similar Carol Garvin watercolor over, in the other direction. But he's my favorite artist of all time. And my favorite saying of his is, "The sun will never rise nor set without my notice and appreciation." But the reason I love his work so much is it's almost like when you attempt like a form of art, like music or something like that, and you fail, that you really appreciate. In other words, I want to do watercolors because I'd seen, a bunch of nice ones. I bought all the equipment, tried my hardest for the longest time, and I said, "You don't have any talent in this area." But I learned the technique, so when I see it done, now I know what they're doing, as opposed to just, it's like, anyway, he's fantastic.
What are you reading these days? Do you keep up with crime fiction, or are you reading all over the place?
I'm right now. I'm actually not reading. I'm reading my email, and I'm reading everything from my publisher, because when a book is launched, all hell breaks loose. It's usually I'd be on the road right now, but I've got boxes all over the place right now that you can't see because it's such a mess. But if you took a look, you'd see everything I've got. Actually, no, I'm not going to show it. But that's what happens at this point in time. I'm reading very short things, in between, which is just whatever my historical curiosity is at the moment. Like that's what I said. I just started getting nostalgic for, I think I saw an old street scene, and I wanted to look up, you know, what we had lost, and that's why I was looking at old restaurants from, you know, all the way from Palm Beach down to Miami, what still existed and what, has gone by.
We're getting some good ones coming in here at the last minute. Let's see. Deidre asks, have you ever had a stalker?
No comment, and for good reason.
um,
And I mean, good question. Just I'm leaving it alone.
yeah, okay, understood. Cynthia again asks, does Tim know about the YouTube video from the regulars at Don's, Electric Barracuda, I believe? Did they do it on their own or were you in on it?
No, that was that was my publisher actually arranged that, and they paid the videographer to go down there, and they just basically we scripted it on the fly. It was just a promotional video for Electric Barracuda, and we had a party at Don's place, the $1 Million Bar. It's on Truman. It's a great bar. It's not what, believe me, it's not ruined by touristy stuff. It's a Key West bars bar.
Somebody in the comments, and forgive me, whoever sent this in, but she was asking about your practice of bringing local beers to your signings. Is that something that you've done for a long time?
You know, I don't do what. There may be some confusion here. I don't want to say sure. People give me local beer, so I end up maybe at my signing table or wherever, because people just bring stuff to me. So that apparently that's one thing they bring, and they gave me one that was Coleman's marijuana beer or whatever, and it had a pot leaf on it, and I was kind of worried to take that out in my car and be driving around in case I got stopped or whatever. But that tends to be more of a tradition of a gift giving thing to me.
Oh, gotcha.
But,
Yeah. Some other really good ones. Several people are asking, will Serge ever visit other states?
He's briefly visited. He briefly visited New York City, and he briefly went out to L.A. In 2 books, and I got my taste of that. He had reasons to do it, both relating to Florida. One was how California was messing up movies set in Florida, and then the other one, I had to have him go to New York so that he could take Amtrak down to Florida, because he was in and out of like a fugue state and like delusional that he was Henry Flagler, opening up the state. 'Cause that railroad pretty much opened up the state. So those are the 2 times he's left. I'm not against leaving, but I would only do so if I have that urge in me. And right now, I got a lot of Florida stories I'm thinking about.
Let's see. Okay. Maybe since we're just about out of time, maybe Mark should have the last word here. And Mark says, I think he's referring to the prospect of making a big Hollywood movie. He says, the boatload of money might change Tim, and we don't want that. We think he should prosper, but only in moderation.
Well, that's an interesting note to end up on.
Well, but I'll respond as Serge says famously, moderation in moderation.
There you go.
Very nice. Yeah, Tim, this has really been fun. I was thinking the first time you came to see us, you were still actually working at the Tampa Tribune. It was back in the 90s.
I think I just left, yes.
Right. So, we've been here for 31 years and this is your book 24. So, it's wonderful to have this history to look back on and get a chance to talk about it. I'm really grateful for Zoom technology that has left us these opportunities, despite the fact that you can't be here and we aren't there.
Well, I would love to come out there. I'm seeing, all the books behind you there, and I love the visit. But at least we got this. And,
we do. And we'll hope that you can come back. I'm sorry that you weren't here because we had our first snowstorm yesterday. It was hilarious, and bits of it left over. And honestly, Patrick's an Arizona native. Patrick, do you remember it snowing in Scottsdale ever?
Not really. I mean, it'll in the mountains, will have a little dusting of it, but not really.
No, it was really a strange experience, Tim. So we'll see. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you at book 25.
Okay, and I want to thank the people that tuned in, because I know Zoom is well, you got to work with it. You got to really, I guess, really want to see me for whatever reason you want to. But no, I really appreciate all the readers out there that joined us tonight. And
You got a lot of them. There have been a lot of people watching too.
We do too. And let me mention that this will become a podcast tomorrow. The audio portion of this will post on our website, and it can be downloaded into all kinds of different listening modes. So if those of you watching want to share this and people don't necessarily want to watch it on Zoom, they can listen to it as a podcast. It's really been a very nice extra that we've been able to give to fans along with the video. So we do thank all of you, and I'll remind you again as I hold up wherever it is, there we are, the book, that we do still have autographed copies, and support Tim, buy a copy, be wonderful, wherever you happen to shop. So good night, Tim. Thank you very much again, and congratulations on
thank you,
Publication
everybody.
Day. You bet. Bye. Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.